podcast of true witness to the living example of healing through relation, 2 by 2. This podcast is a space for us to meet fully in the present and to allow the miracles, the love, and the light to shine through. This is a reminder. We do not wake up alone. We remember the truth together, 2 by 2, as the light reveals itself in the space between us. Welcome back, friends, to another episode. I am so excited to have you here. We have another repeat customer, repeat friend, repeat conversation with my dear friend Constantin. And like always, we kind of jump right off the deep end and dive deep around stories and the script already being written, and what does that actually even mean? And what if, we're one thing and this thing and not all things? Can we be the jack of all trades and a master of none and feel fulfilled, successful? Yeah, just all things. And then we dive a little bit into Pluribus. I think I'm saying that right. The, new hit TV show on Apple Television. And Constantin shares a little bit about his perspective of the unfolding and some big takeaways and also feedback he's gotten that is like so different than what we perceived in regards to it. And then I share what my perception of the show was and how the unfolding of the specialness and just all the things. So this might be one of the shorter podcasts. It's not super short. It might be under an hour for once, but still that does not mean it is without depth and connection and just, all the things. So I'm excited to have you here, and please do all the things, like, subscribe, notifications, comment below. And as always, if you're tuning in, I have another question. If you've been like, I would love to have a conversation with Ashley, please message me or post below. I would love to have you on Light Between Us and dive deeper into whatever that conversation looks like if it feels aligned for us both. So please reach out. Do not hesitate. Granted, these are individuals that I have quote unquote real relationships with. I technically have real relationships with everyone. So enough about that. Sit back, tune in. Here is another deep dive with my dear brother Constantin and myself. Again, thank you so much. Bye-bye. Let's see where it takes us. You were talking about woodworking and stuff. So
yeah, let's talk about that, because I feel like this is a challenge that many people listening to this right now, if anyone is tuning in, will somewhat relate.
Okay.
So I guess a bit of background. You know already, Ashley, right? So I have my full-time gig with Microsoft, which is going amazingly well. Requires quite a bit of my time and energy. Pregnant partner with baby on the way. Chickens already that we take care of together, right? And two dogs. Mm-hmm. And then I have my music I'm working on. And then there's still the business, right? The coaching business, which technically is on hold because I haven't really taken on new clients or done anything in the last, 6+ months. Mm. And, coaching / healing business, right? And now this opportunity came up, I would say, or, just my vision of expanding the homestead that we have with taking what was left for us here from the previous owner, and she left a lot of good stuff, and expanding it so we can set up a foundation for the future where we can breed more chickens, both for eggs and consumption, maybe even to sell some some breeds and unique breeds and whatnot. And the conflict I was going to tell you about right before we started recording is this idea of like, well, on one hand, part of me wants to like work on the business because that's where the money is, but I have a really good paying job, which I'm happy with. And then dedicating time to, of course, the new baby coming in is going to be a priority. But now all these projects I have for the summer to build things and spend time in outdoors, I guess, right, to enhance the quality of life of the chickens, but also enhance the homestead itself, right? So like I'm in this mentally, I mean, right? Like how our ego likes to play the game. It's like, oh, but you know, you can't do that because you have to do this. And when I take myself back a bit, when I look at it from a bigger picture, I'm like, I don't have to do anything. I just have to be and follow my highest joy in a way. That's the word that comes up. So I'm curious to see, you know, your take, because again, like I've had this struggle in one way or another all my life, where you know you have in the back of your head or the back of your mind this, you know, voice that keeps saying, like, you gotta go harder, you gotta do more. You know, you're the sole provider of the family, you gotta do this, the world is in this state, do this. And then the other one is like, well, my passions are my passions. So I love the coaching, I love the healing work, I love all of this stuff. But when does it stop becoming ego and it becomes heart or spirit, or vice versa, right? I guess that's the question I have for myself and for anyone listening.
Yeah. Well, I think like it's like Ken Wapnick used to say when people came to him and asked him like, "Oh, am I coming from a place of the ego or spirit?" And he said, "Well, that's your first problem. You're asking the question. So you're viewing it from a place of ego because you're judging it, right? And you want it to be judged because you can only decide which is which from a place of judgment. So, you know, I believe this, and I think you've experienced this, so you maybe are more open to this idea of the script already being written, right? Like you and I have had many conversations because that would remove quote unquote self-will at the level of form, right? The ability to manipulate, to make different decisions at the level of form. So I think how I am seeing things and what I believe is that the form is going to happen exactly how it's going to happen, right? But it's your perception of it that you can choose. So if the script's already written and Constantin never again works on his quote unquote coaching business, your only choice is not to try to force it, but to just go, like, you know, the statement, roll with the punches. Like, just remember the joy in whatever is happening in this moment, instead of being like, oh, I should be working on my coaching business, that's where the money is, you know, all up in your head. Because the reality is, if it's not happening, it's not happening. And yeah, maybe it will happen tomorrow, but what the ego is when we're sitting up here judging the movie screen, right? Judging what Constantine is doing at the level of form instead of just surrendering to it. And I have been having such direct experiences, direct invitations to really sink further into this, because I keep finding myself in these maybe routine type things, which routines are fine as long as you don't attach to them. So one example, I was going to this yoga class at the Y every Monday and Friday religiously for like the first couple months we were here. And then all of a sudden one day I just didn't feel inspired to go. But I never thought I would never return again. So it would pop back in my head like, well, should I go this week? And I was like, no, that's how things happen. Like, they truly always just fall away when they're not being used anymore. It's us up in our head that keeps them lingering around. So when I finally surrendered to that, like, then I can fully be in the present moment in what I'm actually doing today instead of going to that yoga class. And now Zumba, I fell in love with Zumba, and like I was religiously going 3 days a week, like, and hence I only made it to Zumba because I stopped going to that yoga class too. And I just was like so much joy in this Zumba class. And then all of a sudden the same thing happened again, Constantine. I just didn't feel inspired. And instead of judging it, I'm just like, okay, all right, I guess we're not a Zumba anymore, right? Like, at least in this moment, maybe I'll go tomorrow. I don't know. But it's about just allowing what to come forward. And, you know, in Lighthouse right now, we're talking a lot about like, what does the future of Lighthouse look like? You know, like who is going to continue on, if maybe everyone, maybe no one, is there different dynamics, just all these different things. And it's of course stirred up a lot of stories and what it should or shouldn't look like. And I just have to keep bringing myself back to like, it's going to unfold exactly as it's meant to. And I have no control over that. The only thing I have control over is allowing what stories that are trying to stick, like to cause shame and guilt, like, oh, I'm not worthy, or I'm not good enough, Or if, you know, I started this coaching business, and what if tomorrow, like, that is no longer a thing anymore? What if I don't have Lighthouse? What if I don't have one-on-one clients? And I don't know, it's just this like sense of freedom to, and you start to see things just like flow in and out. And it's like the statement, you're a jack of all trades,
Yeah.
you know, and a master at nothing. And I used to, like, in personal development, they teach you like that's bad, right? Jack of all trades, master of nothing. I will say I feel the most free when all of a sudden, I said to Pat the other day, I was like, oh my gosh, if I made a resume right now, like the other day I was a farm school teacher, I'm an assistant for the lady here, I'm a house sitter, I have a podcast, I know of an Etsy shop, you know, I have one-on-one clients, I have a lighthouse, you know, like the list goes on. And it is just so freeing because at any given moment, if I feel a nudge, I listen and I don't judge it. It's going to happen anyway, but it's if I'm judging it, if I'm open to accepting it and just like seeing the miracles that lie, like being a farm school teacher. I was always going
Yeah.
to do it, but I could have seen it as a heavy weighted thing that had like a purpose of, let's say, making money, or oh my gosh, I don't want to disappoint these people, I have to do it. Instead, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting, let's see what comes. And like, you know, the kids were just amazing. One thing, I know I'm going off tangent, but just one quick thing, one of the kids said to me, she goes, what are you? And I like was like, what do you mean, what am I? Like, I just like had this moment, like I was like, how do I answer this question? Like, what am I? And then I said to her, I was like, well, what are you? Because it's such a broad question, right? Like, what does that even mean anymore? And she goes, well, I'm a kid. And I said, oh, well, I'm just a really big kid. And she goes, actually, you're like parent size. And so I was like, well, I'm just a really big kid. And then we kind of left it at that. But then later on, she comes up to me and she goes, you know what? I figured out what you are. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, you're a farmer. You're here taking care of the farm animals. You're a farmer. And I was just flabbergasted. But I share that because it goes to show that even a child that seems so innocent and stuff, but she's already building stories. You have to be something, and you can't be a kid. Like, she almost let me be a big kid for a minute, but then I fit too much into the parent size category, right? So I couldn't fully be a kid. And so I think it goes to the same concept, is like, you want it to look a certain way, you
Yeah.
believe it should look a certain way, and when it's not looking a certain way, it causes anxiety and shame and guilt, and then you try to force it, but it's not going to happen anyway. I don't know, I went like way off and around.
I don't think. I
So
mean, I think it went where it had to go, and I resonate with most of it, right? Like, I mean, you know, the script being written and all of that. Like, you know, there's still something I like when I see that very not very differently. We see it differently, yet I would say it's similar in many ways, right? Like, but anyway, that's not necessarily the point of what you're trying to. Well, not necessarily the point, but like what you're conveying. And I love the stories aspect of it, right? Because both of us talk a lot about stories and how the more we release the stories, the more we can see the truth that was always there. And that's what I'm seeing, at least in my world, with the music, and now, you know, the chickens, and now with, you know, the story I'm letting go of, you know, never wanting children, right? Not being a father material, all the stuff that at some point I learned, or I created in my field. And it's really interesting to observe and see how stories can disappear and can leave your field just as quickly as they came on. And I feel like a big misconception in the world, and I lived under this a long time, is that, you know, you're kind of stuck with who you are, who you are defined as by everyone else, and it's hard to change that. And the more I go down this path and journey, the more I realize that no, I mean, that's all a story, or a collection of stories. You can be whoever you want to be and release all of that out. So what I'm going with is that, like, going back to your stories of the child, right? Like, her story in that example perhaps is that everyone has to have a label because she's always been labeled herself and everything that she's seen around, and that's what society does. And maybe dropping that story is not necessarily part of her journey or part of where her path is, but it's a mirror for you to realize, wait a second, do I need to be someone to find worth in this life or find anything in this life? And that's kind of what now mirroring back to me. That's what I'm saying as well. It's like, what if I'm all of it? What if I'm the coach and the healer and the Microsoft employee, the father, the chicken raiser, whatever you want to call that, the farmer, whatever, right? Like, what if you're everything and nothing at the same time?
Yeah,
Then it's easy.
I think that's the key, is like when you accept the everything and nothingness, kind of like, you know, how Pat and I named our Instagram Everywhere But Nowhere. When you start to see that it's the mind, it's the ego that wants you to believe that you're everything, right? Because it's individualizing it, it's judging it. And then it's spirit saying, but at the same time, it's nothing, because it's just like, you know, it's like, this is one of those things that's really hard for words, but it's easier to explain, like with travel. So when you travel, the ego looks at the level of form. So it's like, it appears you're going, quote unquote, everywhere to different places.
Okay.
But spirit knows you never went anywhere, that it was always just a story in your mind, right? And so same for like, oh, I'm a farmer, I'm a dog walker, I'm a this, I'm a that. That's the ego judging, right? Because even though judging, we use it as like a negative word, judgment just means anytime you make like an identification of something up against something else, right? Like, I'm a dog walker versus I'm not a dog walker. I'm a farmer versus not a farmer, you know, like that's a judgment because there's an opposite to it. And so when we identify with all of these things, we can easily get caught up in that if it doesn't unfold the way we think it should. So like when we believe like I'm meant to be a healer and heal the world, and I think it looks like this through my coaching and blah, blah, blah. But if it doesn't unfold that way, and instead like your healing ends up coming through your chickens and raising these crazy ass, you know, varieties in the connections that come because of these crazy ass chickens you all of a sudden have. Right. But that doesn't make sense at the level of form that's how I'm supposed to heal the world. Right. With chickens. And so like our Etsy store has come about that way too. Like we thought it was meant, you know, for money and to be able to vintage hunt. And what I'm really seeing is like, no, it's a vessel for connection. And we're writing stories in the process. And so it's like everywhere but nowhere. It also brings us back to like, it's all a miracle or nothing is a miracle, right? Like Einstein said, either everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle. So either everything has the same purpose or nothing has a purpose here. And so if truly the same purpose for everything is essentially the remembrance of truth, then it doesn't matter what you appear to be today. It doesn't matter what you appear to be doing today, as long as you're open to receiving and perceiving its one and only purpose, which is to spark remembrance of the truth of what you are within. Whether it's chickens or standing on a stage like Tony Robbins in front of 10 million people, it is just as important. Yeah. Or unimportant, depends how you look at it.
I mean, what else can I say with that? That's exactly how I see it as well these days and how I feel it, really. And for the longest time, I thought that one had to keep adding to the stories in a way to keep searching for their meaning and their truth, right? When really it's always been there. You just have to actually kind of go the other way around, where you release stories until there's nothing left but the truth of you, and who you are. So very interesting overall.
Well, And if you think about it, like, but like peaceful warrior, you and I've talked about that before. Remember when I did the videos on it a long time ago? Like the first thing the peaceful warrior says is says you got to clear your mind. And then also monks, what are they doing? They spend hours meditating trying to clear their mind. Well, not necessarily clear. So that's it's detaching from the thoughts within your mind. So it's the acknowledgement that they may always be there, because that can be frustrating and shaming too, but it's about
Yeah,
attaching to them or not, right? So like when that girl brought up, like, I still give a story back of I'm a really big child, and so if I were to attach to it, like extreme, let's say, when she came up to me later and said I was a farmer, I would have been like, no, I told you I'm overgrown. Like, I am not a farmer. You know what I mean? Like when we feel this like compelling need for this story to be a part of our life is the problem, instead of just observing it for what it's being used as a tool for interaction, right? That connection with that little girl, it happens to be that it was stories about identification that caused the connection and sparked remembrance in both of us, right? Like now I use it as like a looking glass of like, look at how we're attempting to label everything. And her, like, I kind of defied most of her rules. And so obviously it caused her to spark because she couldn't even respond in that moment. And she obviously kept thinking about it because, like I think it was like an hour and a half later, she needed to tell me that she had figured it out. So it was a mission she needed to figure it out in order to feel a sense of completion and peace and calmness. Um, so yeah.
yeah, very interesting.
So it's not about like necessarily not having them. It's about not attaching to them. And the less you interact with them, the quieter they get, right?
What's been interesting to me over the last few years, but more so since I moved here in the middle of nowhere, so there's more, or I guess less noise perhaps, right? That's a judgment I'm passing on the situation. I've started to observe the stories a lot easier than I could before. So like, let's say we'll have a conversation and all of a sudden I'm like, oh wait a second, I can see this, I can see through the story a bit now.
Mm.
And not necessarily meaning that I'm doing anything with it, just the act of the observation sparks a sort of remembrance of like, wait a second, this is not necessarily part of who I am, or rather who I am, below all the stories. It's more like something that I've learned and I've created in my field, in my life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the same for like it being quieter there, right? Like it's so funny because it's always just about our perception. Because when we were staying at the farm, like the roost, I don't know, maybe you'll tell me that your roosters understand when it's time to rooster or not, but they don't just rooster in the morning. They don't just make
Oh
the
yeah,
noise.
they go, yeah.
It's all day long, right? Like it's a constant noise all day long of like random cockadoodle-doos left and right. Do you have that at your house?
I do, but yes, it's not
Okay, so
as easily to hear in the house because their house is insulated nicely, so I don't hear them much. But when you're outside, you hear them throughout the day,
yeah.
no problem.
So I guess what I'm saying is you said it's quieter out at the farm, but I was talking to someone who made a comment about if they were on a farm where the roosters roosted all day long, it would drive them insane. So in their perspective, it would be like, hell no, you just moved to the fucking loony bin. That's going to drive you crazy, right? So again, it's like we perceive what we believe. And that doesn't mean the form changes, right? It doesn't mean that your place is actually quieter. It means you are perceiving it from that place because that is what you believe. And you can only believe that because of your stories, your perspective, right? And so that's the point of all of this is like, the Course talks about, and I think the Bible references it in some certain way, about the goal here is not to change the world. It's to change your perception of the world, to change your mind about the world. And so I think how you're witnessing where you're at today and just like knowing you and interacting with you, you are definitely having a different perception on things because you've cleared so many stories out. So you feel a lot more at peace more often and more
Hmm.
open to like, oh, I didn't ever plan to be a dad, but I'm like so excited for this. It doesn't make sense, but like, I mean,
Yeah.
because there's so many, we're not going to go into the details, but like everything science would say, you should not be a dad right now. Like it should not have happened, right? Like the percent was like almost
Very
not even
slight.
on the
Yeah.
Richter scale.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not that we change what's outside of us, it's we change our perception of it. And so then we present it differently to people, right? So then they are like, oh, it must be really calm and peaceful at the farm. And then they go to the farm and they're like, this is a fucking zoo. Like, I don't know what he's been smoking. He must be smoking a lot of stuff in that house because this is not calm and peaceful, like he said. But it's the perception, it's the stories they have going on, it's what they need to project out in that moment because they don't have the strength to look at it within. And so that's why, like, when Pat and I showed up to what I call the love farm, I was able to see that, like, all of the unwinding we had done while we were traveling, if we wouldn't have done that, we would not have been able to accept the love and the miracles that were glaring at the farm, because literally you could go to the farm and you could see it two ways: crazy deep love or crazy deep chaos. But it just depends where you're showing up from in that moment as to what you receive and perceive. So I want to believe that the love farm is the love farm, and everybody who comes to the love farm is going to experience what I did. But the truth is, that's not the case. Maybe a higher percentage of people, maybe they'd be more likely to because of how I explain it. But the truth is, it's always about where they're at, of how they're going to perceive and receive. And it has nothing to do with the farm. The farm was just kind of the catalyst for us to fully see that. And the truth is, it's everywhere, right? But we're unwinding to be able to see that.
Yeah. I think the hardest thing in a way for me lately on this path has been this idea of like kind of tying back to the last thing you said, that it's like understanding and accepting that everyone is on their path, and like just because quote unquote I know certain things doesn't mean that everyone I interact with will see things in a similar way, and or it will help them in a similar way that it helped me on the path, right? And it's like not forcing anything. It has been such or forcing less has been such a big shift in my life, because as a go-getter, as someone that's been raised in the environment, you know, go after what you want and what you believe in, to take a step back and just trust, that's been a big one for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's about just being like this open invitation, just constantly, you know, I recently finished this amazing book and I felt like the world needs to have it. But realistically, I know like not everyone's going to perceive it and receive it the same way. But I did send it to some people, and Pat's like, well, what if they don't read it? And I was like, but I felt called to send it to them. So even if they don't read it, it's like it landed in the area it needs to get to the person that's meant to read it. Like, you know, but we have like this preconceived notion, like if I send you a book, you should read it. It's like that's what it means. But I've gone beyond that. I've been, you know, like there's been plenty of books that I've purchased and never read and left places and have been able to see like, oh, I was never meant to actually use those, or, you know, actually read that. I was just meant to be like this carrier, you know, like God's storage unit, essentially, or the universe's storage unit, and then
Yeah.
little like pigeon carrier to the next person. But that goes into like us attaching to things and attaching to ownership. And, you know, one of the biggest things is you cannot keep what you are not willing to give. So that's what true flow is. And when you see the true flow and you allow the true flow, it's like I just said, you're just always kind of like this open invitation. So it's like, you're projecting the light, and it's an invitation for conversation and maybe guidance, maybe not, but it's like the lighthouse, right? Just even if it's like a perfect day and a lighthouse isn't needed, they don't shut the light off. The light still goes at night. Just, if someone needs it, we don't know. Like, we're not here to judge. And it's also the lighthouse isn't making you come to the lighthouse. That's the other piece, right? It's like telling you to actually avoid that area and to go around it, right? And illuminates it to find your way safely to shore, but not like to the rocks where the lighthouse is. Like, you don't literally go into the lighthouse area. Like, it's meant to illuminate around. So I feel like that's kind of what the goal is here, is to like not preach. There's nothing to realize, there's nothing to actually teach because we already all know everything, but to just be an open invitation. And sometimes, it might look like payment, right? Or it may look like conversations on a podcast, or it may look like standing in front of a group of people and speaking, but it's always an invitation. Because if you see it as a teaching or a preaching, then you're always going to be disappointed, because there's going to be that kid in the audience that was like me that's going to question what you just shared and be like, that doesn't make sense, right? And then you're going to feel like you're a shitty teacher, or you're going to question what you're teaching. Does it make sense? Is this really the right thing? Or even preaching, right? Because preaching, same. So instead, you're just inviting. It's just sometimes your invitation is like an individual invitation sent in the mail, or it's like a billboard on New York Times Square and anybody can come, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you're always in a state of inviting. And maybe not everyone wants to come to your party. That's okay. That's cool.
That's it.
But we were taught in school, that's another story, Constantine. When in school, like, if you gave someone an invitation and they didn't come, or you were the kid that didn't get the invitation and everybody else did, like, that was awful.
Oh yeah, I remember those years.
Right?
So yeah.
So then you
like,
feel
let's
that
be
way.
honest, everything in our life, the way I guess life is right now, and this is, it's based on a story of some form, and that's what we grew up with, and that's what, a lot of what we continue our life with is just stories upon stories.
Because it's a dream,
Good, bad,
and you
and
can't.
different, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, what do we like? Literally, if you go, let's say I recommend a book to you right now, and you go to Amazon and you read the preview or whatever, it literally says storyline. Like, that's one of the descriptors, is like, what is the storyline? Get it? Because it's like everything is a story. So if we think of a movie, a book, a story, we're just like appearing to live one of those. So it's a storyline. And like, we all have a different belief of what the ultimate storyline is. And, the goal is to unwind the storyline and remember the truth, like you said earlier, and to get to the true storyline. And the true storyline is true remembrance of what we are. Which we still haven't talked about pluribus yet, but essentially that's like the storyline, right? That's the storyline, for her to remember, like, truth, for her to be open to like the oneness that everybody else is experiencing and is open to, but no one forces it upon her. And they're there at her beck and call, and they even answer some of her craziest requests, right? To the point that she's like, what the F? But it's because they're one, and that's what she wants. So if that's what she wants, that's what they all want. And that's why when she flips out and gets upset, like, people drop dead. Literally, or get into car accidents because they like malfunction. Because that's literally what's happening with her, is she's malfunctioning. The Course says to us, if you're not experiencing joy, something's gone awry. If you're not experiencing miracles, there's an issue. And I feel like that's what we literally witness with her. When she's no longer experiencing that, there's massive issues.
I mean, you can see it before it even takes shape. She's someone that miserable, right? Like despite her quote unquote success, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
can even like if I remember, it's been months now, but like with her partner, right? Like it's almost like that you can hear the partner say, not necessarily with the words, but like just the context, like why you're not happy, you have everything you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it's always chasing. So did I tell you about the book that I think you would really maybe enjoy this? So there's this really good book that Julie brought forward, and I haven't read nonfiction other than like A Course in Miracles in a long time. And so I was super resistant actually to it. And it is like, has been just so transformative for us at Lighthouse. It's called The Soul of Money. And so it's by this Lynn Twist, I think. But essentially, it's not about learning to get more money. You know, it's not about releasing stories to get more money or less money. It's really just like kind of taking a bird's eye view of what money is and like really blowing your mind in how wrapped up people are, no matter if you have tons of it or none of it.
Yeah.
You're still like in this same scarcity, which scarcity is just a perspective. It's not even a real thing. Like it's, if you're not experiencing abundance, it's because you're in a perception. Yeah, but so that's been really, really good witness to that, because it goes to what you were saying where they said, well, you have everything and you're still not happy. And so then she like requests more things, right? And so one of the things she talks about in there is that, right? It's the scarcity. Like even the wealthiest of people still are like, when I get that, then I'll be happy. And then they get it. And then when I get that, right? Because it's never about that. It's never about outside of you. It's never about at the level of form. It's always about the internal state of being and how you're witnessing the form. And that's what this book is really rewriting your relationship with money in the aspect of no matter how much you have. If you have 1 penny or you have 1 bazillion pennies, being able to see the magic and the tool that it actually is, and that you will always have the exact amount you need to fulfill the next steps of the storyline, right? The movie, the storyline. Yeah. So,
That's it.
yeah. How else have you been?
You got me contemplating on a few things there, but
What are you contemplating on? Share.
well, no, I mean, more on the plausible stuff that we talked about, right? And you know, the how the story is evolving, and I'm still curious to see what direction they want to take it in with the next seasons.
Is
And
there going to be
what's
more
the,
seasons?
well, yeah, of course. I'm pretty sure it got renewed because it was so successful. Let's see here. I'm gonna Google it really quick. Season 2. Yeah,
That'll
it's
be
been
interesting.
confirmed and in development because they
Okay.
ordered 2 seasons up front. That's what happened. Yeah, okay.
Oh, so before it even was successful, 2 seasons were already planned.
Yeah, but it's not gonna be till next year at best.
Yeah. It'll be
So it's a big
interesting.
gap. You'll probably have to rewatch it before you go to the new one.
Yeah. What was one of your biggest takeaways from it?
Let's see. Besides the one we talked about is it was pretty much my biggest as well, in terms of operating with stories and operating without stories, and knowing that you're one, and you're
Mm-hmm.
going towards the same goal in a way. Um, I guess looking how many were there, like 8 or 9 different people that were unaffected, so to speak, right? And
I think it was
how
cool.
like her and the guy from Argentina, they were against what it was, and the other guys are cool with it. But in the end, it was the same thing because they're just stories.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you're like yes or no doesn't really matter in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, technically, at least one of them, I believe, by the end of it, got turned into one of them, right? Like, if I'm not mistaken, or it was on the process to, right? Because they had discovered how to fix it.
Yeah.
Which I guess some level of stories allow for that. But I still feel like no matter how, which person you would look through it, right? They all are operating a different story level, the ones that were not turned, so to speak. And it was interesting to observe because didn't make one or the other better or worse. It just where I was, and as I was observing them or watching the show, I would be like, I agree with that person, I agree with that. Like, I was like, oh, what would happen if I was in the situation, right? Like, oh, I would, I would do this and this and that from an ego perspective, and then what else? Right? You could probably get tired pretty fast, but who knows?
Mm-hmm.
The world is a big place.
But I think that's what it was showing you is like the different aspects of like the specialness, like the one guy who orders, Air Force One, and he's flying that around with all of his
Yeah.
women, all the things. And then, the lady that she has her child who's one of them, but she still very much is accepting of it because her child is open to the oneness. So it's like all different levels of the ego special relationships is what I saw. So like special relationships with people, special relationships with things, special relationships with images. And then ultimately we see her, I forget her name, whatever, the main lady, like she moves through those special relationships on her own. Like at the beginning, it's with her actual partner that dies and doesn't make
Yeah.
it, right? And, that she needs a special burial and just all this specialness. And then she kind of moves to things. And that's when she starts requesting all these really crazy things, right? Like a bomb and this and that. And then she moves to like, well, is there other people like me? And so, because she's special, right? And so these
Yeah.
other people are special. And even the language, she's like, how many, not only was she like, how many people are like me, they had to also only speak English because they offered up the people that didn't speak English, and they
True.
would translate. And she was
Yeah,
like,
and they
no,
removed. Yes.
they need to speak English. So like we're seeing all this specialness, and it's continually unwinding more and more, and to the point that she even starts a special relationship with the lady, kind of like her main, it would be like her highest self in a way if we think of it, the lady that comes to her, all like her guide or whatever you want to call her.
Yeah.
She falls in love with her. But what I saw, it's kind of like my mentor Colton, like I thought I fell in love with him until I realized, no, I fell in love with the vision of myself in him, right? It was like the first time I really loved myself, like felt the deep love of God shine through him, like fully accepted it. And I feel like that's what happened to her in Pluribus, is like she started to actually receive and perceive the love, but it still had the specialness lens. So she felt this immense love. And instead of realizing like it doesn't need to have a level of form, it doesn't have to do with the body, I can just accept this love. She had to pin it on a body, and it was that woman, right? Like, oh, it must be because I've fallen in love with this woman, when really the woman was just this mirror of the love that was within her the whole time. And so like to me, like that like was just watching her unwind every story that we attach to at the special level. She gets drunk, and then that's the night she blows the girl up, right? That's another special relationship with alcohol and drugs and addiction, like, and she even gets the girl drunk, and then that's the night when they have the bomb and she sets the bomb off, and there's specialness everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we so often, when we feel that love, we feel like we need to attach it. So if it doesn't make sense, we feel bad about it, shameful, guilt, whatever it may be, instead of like realizing like that love we feel is never about a body. It's the mirror, it's the permission slip to experience the deep love within. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
No, that's such a brilliant point, and it's something I hadn't necessarily seen exactly the way in the past. And I'm just looking back at my life. You just sparked something there, right? It's like you perhaps feel you love someone or something because of who, like if I want to paraphrase what you said, because of who you are in their presence, right? Essentially, or who you see yourself as possible in that situation. That's actually powerful because it's so true when you sit and think about it.
So it has nothing to do with the person, though. That's the key. So it's like, yeah, it's so hard. It's like you can feel the same love with a quote unquote intimate partner as you can with the homeless person when you really accept it for what the love is. It's this flowing of God's love, right? Because it's only gross or inappropriate when you put like ego stories over it that, oh, this means then we need to have sex or make out or any of this, because that's what we're so trained to do. We're trained that that feeling of love within must be like sexually intimate love. So then if it doesn't make sense, we shut it down instead of allowing it to flow through and realize what it is, which is just true connection at the level of oneness. I mean, like we could go down a whole rabbit hole like about sex and stuff, because we're constant, when we feel that deep love with another body, we then want to join with them. And literally, like, sex is the attempt to become one, like to join. And you can never fully join because there's skin and, you know, in between, because bodies do not join. The mind joins. But because of the stories, right, and us needing it to be about the body, then we are trying to make the joining happen. And it's just not possible. Which that's a whole rabbit hole. That would be like a whole conversation. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And I think like with Pluribus, that's why she falls in love with that girl, is because she mirrors so much of what her partner did. And so she feels like that must mean you're my new partner. And she's a girl, right? There's no coincidence that this woman is a lesbian. And then her guide is a woman. Now, if that would have been a man, I'll bet you she wouldn't have had an intimate relationship. Or if it accidentally happened, she would have felt shame and guilt because it doesn't align with her story that she's a lesbian. But because she was a woman, it perfectly aligned to create an ego story of intimacy at the level of the body. Now, it doesn't mean like you never have a relationship. Like, you know, Pat's my partner and we are, you know, in a relationship together, but it means that like I don't seek love and connection in Patrick the body. I know it's through Patrick the body, and that like he is probably one of my greatest mirrors, at least in this moment. And right now our relationship together is meant as part of the script, but I wouldn't, you know, if things were to end tomorrow, like it's more of an ability to trust because I'm not seeking salvation in him, but instead through him. Would I be sad? Yeah, because I appear to be living this human experience. But would I be devastated like I was with my divorce? Absolutely not, because I know it's like just a different purpose these days.
Yeah, that's so powerful to hear. You explained that, and right from like the outside, depending on stories, right, one could be like, well, you know, if you're not going to experience the same type of pain if you were to lose, you know, him versus your marriage, that means, you know, he means less to you than someone else did. And in reality, it's like the way I see it now, looking at my relationships and all, it's like, quote unquote, we are different people at these stages, right? And like the person that went through the divorce had one set of stories, and the person going through things now has a different set of stories to look through, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's just like the Course talks about, it's not about diminishing the specialness in in the people you see as special. It's about bringing everyone to the level of special. So I think that's the piece. If everything is like worthy and, you know, the most beautiful thing ever, then it doesn't matter if it appears in the form of Patrick or, you know, a dog or whatever it may be. It just doesn't matter. It's the stories at the level of form that keep us in what appear to be, you know, relationships. And I don't know, I'm starting to, you know, go down this whole rabbit hole myself, but like I'll even say to Pat, I think I said something to him the other day of like, are you going to stay with me longer? Because I just like, I still say these things. And he's like, or no, I said something and I was like, you're not going to fight for me? And he's like, no. I was like, but you know, the ego is like, oh my gosh, that would be awful and all these things. But the truth is like, why? Like, that's not what we're here for. And it's not about fighting or not fighting. It's about just going with the flow, and what happens. And yeah, I don't know. I've kind of gone off on a tangent here, but yeah, I feel like that's what I see her learning in Pluribus, because then the guy kind of falls in love with her too. That becomes like a weird sticky situation as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see what direction they take it in.
Yeah. I was curious how good of ratings it got, because usually like mind-opening movies that really expand your perception get like 10% on Rotten Tomatoes or like nothing, and Pluribus was like, I think, what is it, like 9 or 10 stars? I mean, it's like,
yeah, it's pretty high.
Yeah, pretty high. So I think it's a beautiful showing that people, you know, people are open to perspective shifts, maybe, or they just saw it very comical because it's like Kill Bill. You know, it's very like, what do they call it, slapstick comedy? Or...
it could be. It probably is a mix because, like, from the people I talk to,
Oh yeah,
I mean, you're the only one that I've talked to about this that were looking at it from a different perspective. A lot of people are looking from like, oh, this is a cool thought experiment, you know, end of the world type stuff, fun, you know, fun movie or fun show to see, because it's fairly well done overall, and you know, some more unique concepts. It can be dragging at times, right? Because it is slow at times, so I can see that. But yeah, no, at least from the people I've talked to.
That's interesting. But the cool piece with that, though, is that it doesn't fall upon deaf ears. Like, you can't unsee what you're seeing, and maybe if you don't understand it today, but there's remembrance being sparked, I promise, because it's so close to the actual truth. So it's just cool to see more and more stuff come out like that, I guess, and to become popular enough that lots of people read it or watch it or this or that. Like the book I just read, Theo of Golden, has become like a super big seller now out of nowhere. And that's another big perspective shift book if you're open to seeing that. And it's nonfiction, so of course I'm sure there'll be people that are like, oh, that was a really good heartfelt story. You know what I mean? Like, just see it in a different, like, oh, it was a good Hallmark book kind of way, instead of like, holy crap, like this is like a completely new way to look at things. A whole new world, you know, like The Little Mermaid. Oh, yeah. Friend.
Oh, good stuff, Asha. Good stuff.
Any final thoughts you're thinking?
No, I'm enjoying this quietness in the mind at times, right? When like before a million thoughts would race, and now at times, more often than not nowadays, I can just be and not have to do anything or say anything, just be. That's it.
Yeah. Beautiful place to be. Well, thank you for coming on and chatting, and
as always, thank you for having me, and it's good to catch up.
Yeah.
And,
next time you might have a baby.
Next time. 9 weeks away. So.
Well, thank you so much, friend.